Hi, everyone. This is another midweek hello from the middle of the woods. And I'm thinking this week about stories. And I had a thought. I thought, oh boy, this will be a perfect Wednesday video topic. And it came when I was reading something about the latest conspiracy theories and just finding myself frustrated and bewildered and furious at these stories that are so unhelpful and far-fetched and seem to proliferate whenever we find ourselves in some kind of crisis. And, you know, last week we were talking about Thomas and his doubt, and it was that Sunday. And I found myself asking myself, well, how is what I believe necessarily different, or is it, than these conspiracy theories that I find so frustrating and scary and xenophobic and racist and destructive? And apart from, hoping that I subscribe to a Christianity that really does continue to hold God's love for all people at its center, apart from that, is there anything less outrageous about our story? And I think the obvious answer is no, especially once you start to get into the miraculous stuff like virgin births and resurrection. How do you make sense of all of that? And as I've often explained to friends who start to ask questions about, like, so you're, like, actually religious? And, they're like, but what about all the, like, crazy stuff? They ask me. And, I don't think it's possible to sort of make ourselves believe impossible things in the same way that we believe, 2 and 2 is 4. Even if you're a parent struggling with, the new math and whatever it is your kids are expected to do, 2 and 2 is still somehow 4. Or, that gravity works, or, those sorts of things. I mean, I think the kind of belief, as I so often emphasize to you all, is not this process of just, figuring out with your head. It's not just something to agree with, right? But it struck me, it was like, wait, maybe belief is more about the story that you love. And so I thought about this, and I love our story. I love it so much. It's worth shaping a whole life around. And so I'm trying. And then I thought, well, is it not love for the conspiracy theorists? What is their story to them? That seems like also a story that they love for some reason. I thought, oh, well, that might be a more interesting way to think about this, other than like, I'm right, you're wrong, or the other sorts of ways that we so often talk to and about each other in our fractured society. But then I was thinking too about one of my favorite psychologists I used to read a lot more of, James Hillman, and one of his really, really smart books is called Healing Fiction. And it's about the stories that we tell ourselves, about our lives, about who we are, about, other people. And those stories can either make us sick, or those stories can heal us. Which is not quite the same as saying, like, think happy thoughts and good things will happen, or like, if you wish upon a star, but rather that the habits of mind that we get into shape so much about how we understand ourselves, and so much about what we believe about ourselves, especially about our own worth, our dignity, our lovableness, that it's worth paying attention to our stories. So I've been sitting with that the last few days and thinking about, like, but man, what are the stories that I tell myself? What stories do I love in the sense of I love to go back to this? Oh, nobody loves me. I'm not a lovable person. I'm not working hard enough. I would be more lovable if I just worked harder. These are some of my stories. And I don't love them in like a deep, loving, affection way, but boy, I sure am attached to them. And I think one of the reasons that I cling so much and stick with this fabulous, outrageous, impossible, divine conspiracy story that is our story of resurrection and new life is because at its heart, there is God's view of us, of me, as inalienably lovable, that we are lovable because God first loved us. And so there's nothing that can happen. There's no story I can tell myself. There's no awkward interaction I can have with a friend or loved one that can make that not true. And I don't know about you, but I need a pretty powerful story in order to counteract the million little stories that we're told every time we look at a piece of advertising or see some kind of critical comment or any of these things, right? That tell us that we're not enough if we just lost weight, if we just had more manageable hair, if we just were more powerful or made more money, then we would be acceptable. Man, those voices are just everywhere and in these like really subtle ways. So I need to be reminded that who we are is enough, that we're made in God's image, that no matter what happens to us, there is a loving God who embraces us every moment of our lives, up to and into and beyond what we know is the end, beyond death itself. And that, I think, on a sort of like thinking level, right, that puts things in perspective. But it's more important than that, even. There's a different story to live in, to love, to breathe like air. And that's that we all have a purpose and that we all deserve to exist, that we all deserve love, to love and to be loved, that we all matter. And a lot of times, or the more I think about all of you, I think the more our job as Christians in these times is to remind one another all of those things. You matter. Your life matters. Your heart matters. Your ideas matter. All parts of you matter. And that there's nothing that has ever happened or that will ever happen to make you unlovable. Now, it can feel that way at times. So much of life is a set of circumstances that we don't choose, as we certainly know in these times. But those circumstances don't alter the underlying fundamental reality of who we are, God's beloved creations. So I invite you to think about these things. What are your stories? What are your go-to places? What are your habits of mind? Are they helpful? Are they true? Do they hold a space for truth that gives life? Or are they small stories that keep you small, that keep you sort of contained within a known world where you don't have to try and you don't have to risk? Those aren't stories that are going to bring life. So I challenge you, if you're up for it, share your stories. Share them with somebody else. Ask them what their stories are. It's kind of amazing the stuff that we carry around with us and the weight of some of these stories that we tell ourselves. And then maybe we can ask each other, what if we let those stories go? What if we stepped into a much bigger story, a divine story, in which we are sacred and inviolable, in which our dignity is radiant because we have been loved into new life. It's a thought. I think we've got some rainy days ahead, so if you're stuck kicking around the house ruminating, maybe you want to ruminate on this rather than all the things that are wrong. All right. Much love to you all. Tweets from the birds, and we'll see you soon.